Kituo, chukua. Niko hai! Niko hai!
I bet you thought you were lucky.
As a kid who grew up on 90s superhero cartoons, no movie franchise frustrates me more than X-Men. It's a series that pretends to be about an ensemble cast, but it really only focuses on a handful of central characters, while others serve as little more than fan service. The spotlight tends to shine more on specific names, and for most of the series' running time, one of those was Wolverine. Now, I'm not going to deny the inherent coolness of Wolverine. A manlet weeaboo who can take a beating and walk it off and has the sickest set of weapons built into his body.
Shit, bitch, we're gonna bust up that stage like a high school kegger. We're just gonna outwit LaFour's X-Men style.
Should I call you Logan, Weapon X?
No, Wolverine, snickty, snoring.
What he's doing is imitating Wolverine's berserker attack with his adamantium claws.
When the X-Men were big, they got the standard Hollywood treatment, including having video game tie-ins to go along with their releases. I'm going to talk about the two games that featured everyone's favorite murder badger, the video game adaptation of X-Men Origins Wolverine and X2, Wolverine's Revenge. I'm mashing these together instead of covering one of them in a thinking bout and the other in a passing thoughts, because I think there are strong points and weak points to both titles, and in my mind, there's an ideal Wolverine game somewhere between these two concepts. Whenever you make a game based off of an established character, the biggest struggle is trying to create systems that enable the player to feel like they're in that character's shoes. When we look at these two titles, always keep in mind that what we're looking for is whether the mechanics of these games allow the player to feel like they're Wolverine. X-Men Origins Wolverine, the video game, is a 2009 character action game developed by legendary studio Raven Software and published by the other serial studio killer Activision. It takes liberties with the plot of X-Men Origins Wolverine, the film, by fleshing out one of the missions that Logan did with his old outfit, as well as changing key moments that happened in the film itself for the sake of being a video game. The intro starts with Wolverine hiding in what appears to be the Zone from the Stalker series. His hair looks a little off from how it's usually been done in the movies, but I can chalk it up to being an early concept trailer before they really fleshed the game out. Younger viewers might not know it, but back then, a lot of character action games took inspiration with their mechanics from Sony's God of War series. Kind of like how games from 2 generations ago borrowed heavily from the Batman Arkham series. And XMO is one of those titles, but it does a good job carving out its own niche. If you're going to crib from a game for its combat, you could do a lot worse than God of War. Light attack, heavy attack, grapple, block, dodge. It has all of the fundamental movements necessary for a character action game. What a lot of God of War likes tend to forget is that, although God of War was renowned for its graphic violence, the game itself was pretty funny at times.
Help me! God, help me! Thank you! Thank the gods you came back for me!
I didn't come back for you.
No! Run! Run! The beasts have taken Athens! Look out! No! No! Stay away from me! Go! 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 The city! What will
There's a Verhoeven-esque type of humor in some of the gratuitous violence that happens in God of War, and XMO is the only game that comes to mind that has that same kind of levity. That's the first thing you see after the pre-rendered intro, and I'm chalking that up as one of the strongest starts to a video game I've ever seen. It sets a tone for the rest of the game, and it's a moment that stays with you well into the game when it starts to show its flaws. The combat in XMO is pretty robust, even at the start. X for light attack, Y for heavy attack, B to grab, and A to jump. Left trigger blocks and dodging comes in a few different flavors. You can either hold left trigger and move the left stick in any direction, or double tap with the left stick to roll. There's also a dash of sorts that propels Logan forward when you tap the right bumper. Wolverine also has feral senses, which is the game's conceit for detective vision. It makes interactable objects visible, as well as reveal cloaked enemies. It also shows which parts of the level can be used as hazards against enemies or against Logan himself. Special mention goes to these little spikes in the jungle levels that let Logan do this simple finisher, which is hilarious in retrospect considering how Logan ends. Wolverine's known for two things, being Canadian and his accelerated healing factor, which allows him to recover from life-threatening damage and gives game devs carte blanche to implement regenerating health. The health regen is pretty good in XMO for the most part. It's cool to see Logan get practically decimated and see his internals exposed, and then watch his body knit itself but retain clothing damage. As you progress in the game, you gain XP. Gain enough and Logan levels up, which is indicated by him erupting in a shower of light and repairing his damaged clothes. Leveling up earns skill points, which can be used to increase Logan's stats as well as abilities he unlocks during the campaign. You can select which ability to use by holding down the right trigger and pressing any of the face buttons. Abilities range from unique claw attacks to going into a berserk mode. Activating an ability will consume Logan's rage meter, which fills up by getting kills in combat. You can find dog tags from the various corpses scattered across the campaign. These are just free XP boosts that can push you into the next level if you're just short a few bodies. The last bits of the game's progression system are the mutagens. These are passive skills you can collect during the campaign, and they increase various stats or affect how Logan builds meter. The real draw to this game's combat is the lunge attack. If you hold down left bumper, a cursor will appear that shows you where Logan will lunge. You complete the maneuver by pressing right bumper. This is the reason to play this game. Lunging never gets boring and it has so much utility. You can use it to close on enemies from a distance, or you can use it to cross over gaps. The unfortunate side effect of this is that the game tries to work around this mechanic by having certain types of enemies bat Logan away when he lunges, and some enemy gimmicks are built around the mechanic, which limits how you can approach a boss. Lunge at the wrong time and you eat shit, but lunge when the enemy is distracted and you have to mash attacks at its weak spot and jump away before it throws you off. This is almost every boss fight in XMO. The standout fights include Sabretooth, which is a decent attempt at having a mirror match boss since he can do everything Logan can. He can even lunge, and you can either overpower him or fall to him depending on your reaction time. His health also regenerates as quickly as Logan's, so you'll have to be quick and not turtle if you want to come out on top. The Sabretooth fight teaches you how to pull off parries, which is what happens if you block just as an enemy makes contact. Parries allow you to break combos and put some breathing room between Logan and the enemies. The other boss fights are gimmicky and less interesting as a result. The Blob boss fight takes place in a supermarket for some reason, even though in the film Logan fights him in a boxing ring. And the Gambit fight involves neon signs because, hey, if you're gonna have Las Vegas as one of your levels, go big. The Blob's gimmick is that you have to wear him down so you can lunge onto him and then steer him into various shelves in the store to cause damage. Gambit's fight sprawls across the Las Vegas rooftops, while he taunts you as you parry his attacks.
Are you crazy? Where'd you go? Whew. You stuck real good, mon frere. Here, let me give you a reason to get unstuck. Au revoir.
The campaign structure is interesting because you're technically following two paths in parallel. The main path generally follows the course of the film, with key locations being fleshed out, as well as new areas being introduced to pad out the experience. The secondary path goes into detail about the last mission that Logan did with Task Force X, his old wet work unit. These segments are good because they break up the droll environment in the main campaign with a jungle palette, but they feature some of the worst enemy types in later levels. I feel like the campaign would have benefited if it put more focus into either of the paths. Maybe set the entire game in the jungle to encourage fans to pick up the game to get more background on the events that led up to the film. Or set the game into the parts of the movie where Logan's a fugitive, so that there's a tighter focus on the predator-prey dynamic he would have with Stryker. I said earlier that the game introduces new areas to pad out the playtime, and that's the worst thing about XMO. Everything, I mean everything, feels padded out. By the second level, I was already noticing the pacing issues. Every level feels like it could have shaved off 20 minutes and the game overall would benefit. The tutorial level starts off in the jungle with Logan dropping into a hot zone. This opening level tries so hard to keep your attention by giving you one moment after another of pure insanity, with Logan attacking a chopper, running through a wall of guys along a rope bridge, using a jeep to crash into an enemy base, and taking on a fleet of boats during a turret section. Because Wolverine is such a powerhouse, the game creates situations that hinder his abilities. When you break out of the Weapon X facility, a scientist who gains cold feet from working in a clandestine military research base that's experimenting on human kids, tells Logan that his core abilities have been dampened, including his healing factor and his feral senses. So for most of this level, regenerating health and detective vision are off the table. This is the second level of the game. It feels like this should happen either at the very beginning or at the midpoint of the game. The gimmick for this level is to run around and power machines with batteries while avoiding gunfire by moving bulletproof barriers around. Logan runs into a little girl who can teleport. It's interesting how the subplot for this mission has Logan taking care of a little girl when that was the entire plot of Logan. This level introduces invisible guards who can shotgun you into submission. And they're pretty bad. So are the Wendigo enemies that replace the lava men in the jungle levels. That's another weird thing about this game. It feels like the unique enemy types introduced were sourced from another game altogether. I don't want to think too hard about the Dark Continent implications of the tribespeople in the jungle levels, because I don't think Raven put that much thought into them other than exotic video game enemies. There are standard soldier types, but then firebenders get introduced, and later on the lava men appear, and after that there are these fighting game bosses with their weird barrier move and leg drop attacks. If you think that's weird, wait until you reach Las Vegas and see Gambit colluding with what I can only describe as Shiva from Mortal Kombat. Just a harem of Shivas. I don't remember that being a thing in the Thieves Guild. I'd be willing to write all of this off as a confusing mess if it weren't for the fact that the combat carries the entire game. It feels good to throw yourself into a crowd of enemies, but then another problem sets in. That padding issue tends to draw combat out, and eventually, everything just becomes rote. After a while, I just started changing up my tactics so that instead of fighting everything with my claws, I just started grabbing enemies and yeeting them off stage. I find it ironic that I'm talking about another movie tie-in game and point out that my preferred strat is to defenestrate as many enemies as possible. At least the game knows how fun that can be, because there are items that react to enemies you've thrown, such as these statues with spikes or this cement mixer in Las Vegas. When comparing the game's continuity to the events of the film, there are some interesting parallels, but also some inconsistencies. Somehow, XMO not only has Hugh Jackman voicing Logan, but it also has will.i.am voicing his film character, John Wraith. In the game, Logan has to hunt down Wraith as he's been captured by Trask. Because this game predates Days of Future Past, Trask isn't portrayed by 4-foot king Peter Dinklage, but by a black guy who becomes racist towards mutants if you listen to the audio files in the level.
You're nothing more than an animal that should be terminated! Then what are you waiting for? Shoot me!
This level is pretty interesting because it's set in a Sentinel factory and Logan faces off against parts of a Sentinel before squaring up against a fully constructed prototype at the end. There are some cool set pieces like using a sentinel hand to destroy its head, but this level's gimmick reveals that Raven was in love with Portal, since that's what most of the puzzles in this level involve. Hell, there's a secret room that you can reach via portals to find this. I can't be too hard on Raven. Portal was only 2 years old at the time and stayed a meme for quite a bit. Anyways, once you rescue Wraith, you meet up with Mystique, who turns out to be a former CIA spook in this game's continuity. I don't see how that tracks with how Mystique was in the early X films, as basically a terrorist who didn't have plans herself, but did Magneto's bidding. However, this is the important thing to take away from this exchange.
You be careful, Miss Darkholme. That's my son you're carrying in there.
See you up top.
What you thinking of that, Kurt?
So according to this cutscene, Wraith is Nightcrawler's dad, which explains Will.i.am's power in the movie. But then it creates issues with the stuff that happened in X2, when Nightcrawler actually talks to Mystique.
It's your mom, dude.
Even without this new information, I always thought it was weird how X2 had Kurt simping over his mom, but now that the game has confirmed that link, it's even more awkward. There's a scene in the film where Will.i.am tries to fight Sabretooth, and it doesn't work out. Creed has a cheeky line he says to Wraith before finishing him off.
Ooh. I can feel your spine, Johnny boy. That's funny. Never knew you had one.
You don't see that exchange in the game, but I do like how they reference it on Logan's end.
Hang tight. I'll be there to give you... Ow! Ah!
I can feel his spine, little brother.
Creed!
I'll be seeing you real soon, Jimmy.
Oh shit, they even got Liev Schreiber to show up for this game. While I think the game as a whole could drop some ballast, there are still some amazing shots in the campaign that kept my attention, such as this part where Logan has to remain in this machine until it restores its healing factor.
We killed the bastard! I can't believe it! He's dead! Yeah, we did it! Target is down!
Weapon X is dead! I repeat, Weapon X is dead!
Hey, somebody take my picture!
Be sure to send me a copy.
Shit, he's alive!
Weapons loaded, let's go!
Also, when you fight the Sentinel, it goes airborne, and you have to do the skydiving set piece to finish it off. This can be annoying if you can't get the timing down, but it's worth it solely for this cutscene.
Should have had him crash closer to town.
That is so raw that it made up for the boring factory level. After that is Las Vegas, and the game tries to wrap up the last few missions into the final act of the film, where Logan meets Gambit, goes back to the Weapon X facility, fights Sabretooth again, and then fights Deadpool. These bits aren't as fun as the early parts of the game, and it really feels like the game runs out of steam. It's not bad per se, it's just that these parts of the game never hit the same high point as the start of the campaign. When the game ends, it turns out that the opening cutscene was set years ahead in the Days of Future Past timeline. That's why Logan's hair looks off. This game was oddly prescient because Wolverine was the main character in the Days of Future Past film. A cool bonus feature in XMO is that you can collect certain Wolverine statues during the campaign to unlock challenges. These challenges pit you against another Wolverine in a different outfit. There are 3 alternate outfits in the game, and this is really the only way we're ever going to get to see Hugh Jackman in an actual Wolverine suit, instead of being teased about it in the deleted scene from The Wolverine. The objectively best pick is the X-Force outfit, by the way. The one last thing I gotta point out in XMO is how good the lip-syncing is for Wolverine during the codec calls.
Roger. Goes for a 1 out.
Hey, Logan, what the hell's going on? How'd we get stuck with a CIA spook? And why on this mission?
Probably because this part of the world is politically sensitive.
Shit. We don't need a CIA babysitter telling us how to act.
You serious? Come on. Darkholme's a hell of a lot easier to deal with than most of the CIA operatives I've met.
You mean she's a hell of a lot easier on the eyes? Can you get a load of
Do you
this?
gentlemen realize this is an open comm line?
Sorry, Miss Darkholme. I forgot. Greed out.
Reminder, this game came out in 2009, and it's as good as Jesse's lip-syncing in Control.
They say I'm the director, but what does that mean? I have no experience in leadership roles. I have no on-the-job training.
So that's X-Men Origins Wolverine the game. It's fun overall, but tends to outlast its welcome. Now let's talk about X2, Wolverine's Revenge. It's bad. Fuck this game. Okay, I'll actually talk about X2. X2 is a 2003 character action game by Genepool Software. Unlike X-Men Origins Wolverine the game, X2, Wolverine's Revenge, doesn't even try to adapt the plot of X2, X-Men United. Turns out Larry Hama wrote the plot. He's the guy who turned G.I. Joe from a random toy soldier into the 80s cartoon franchise. According to X2's plot, Logan was captured against his will and subjected to the Weapon X program, instead of volunteering for the adamantium treatment. He breaks out and attacks the facility, but the scientist in charge of the project tells him that they injected Logan with something called the Shiva virus, as a contingency if he ever broke free. When Logan asks the professor how long he's got left, he's told that it could happen at any time because of Logan's healing factor stalling the process. So basically, Logan has Fox die. Fun fact. Did you know that the voice of Solid Snake, David Hayter, wrote the script for X2, X-Men United? Just a little bit of trivia there for you. Years after his escape, Logan gets medical assistance from Beast about his Fox die. Beast and Xavier tell Logan that he has to return to the Weapon X facility to find a cure, and that he only has 48 hours to do so before he succumbs to the virus.
2 days? That's my birthday. Ain't that a kick in the head?
If you couldn't pick it up, Mark Hamill is voicing Logan in this game, and he does a pretty good job keeping that low growl timbre in his voice.
Bad move. I don't like surprises.
Somehow they got Patrick Stewart to voice Xavier, and most of his lines were spent on some bonus features that I'll bring up later. X2 features a standard control scheme of most action games. Primary attack, which does either claw swipes or punches, and secondary attack, which is just kicking. But it also provides an action button that allows Logan to perform context-sensitive moves called strikes in the game. Strikes allow Logan to take on multiple enemies with a single move, finish off single targets, and perform stealth takedowns. Activating Logan's sense overlays a thermal imaging filter on the screen that is eye-searingly painful to look at. It also puts Logan into a sneaking stance that prevents him from alerting unsuspecting enemies. There's also a crouch button that causes Logan to crawl on all fours, like this one gif I saw of the G-Man from Half-Life 2 doing the fast zombie animation. If you hold down both the crouch and sense buttons, you can have the thermal imaging, but move faster than sneaking. Performing stealth kills rewards you with dog tags, which unlock more strikes for Logan to perform. The meter above Logan's health is his rage meter, which fills up whenever he takes and deals damage. You can manually activate his rage after a certain portion of the bar is full, or let the bar fill up, which automatically triggers his rage. His attacks are more powerful, and he can drop enemies in a couple of hits. So what's bad about X2? There's a term in game design called conveyance that refers to how effective a game is at informing the player of the rules and systems of the game. I'm no game designer, and I don't want to embarrass myself by misusing this term, so instead I'll break down X2's problems into 3 categories: poor mechanics, poor signposting, and poor feedback. X2 is a button dedicated to unleashing or retracting Logan's claws. Now, I think this is a cool feature, because one of the things that makes Wolverine so appealing is the fact that his weapons are a part of his body, and he can call them up at will. But here's where the game starts introducing really stupid ideas. Whenever your claws are out, you cannot heal from damage. I can see what the reasoning is for that. The game wants to introduce some risk-reward system when you're in combat, but that system falls apart because Logan's healing factor in this game is agonizingly slow. It would be one thing if the healing factor immediately restored health like it kind of does in XMO, but it's so slow that it kills whatever momentum the game is supposed to have. What also sucks is that it's really easy to get caught in an enemy's combo in this game. The animations for Logan's claw swipes take more frames than an enemy's melee combos, so you can be trapped in stunlock for a good while from a single enemy. The AI also likes to rely on a sweep kick attack that completely ducks under Logan's attacks and chips away at his health. If you get surrounded by several enemies, you can be trapped by this attack and lose a considerable amount of health before even landing a hit. There's no dedicated block button, and the only real defensive move Logan has is his Prince of Persia-esque vaulting maneuver that doesn't always go over enemies, so you'll just flip into their fists. If that weren't bad enough, ranged enemies can chew through Logan's health if you don't prioritize them. You can hit them once to make them drop their guns and then deal with them as melee opponents. To account for Logan's piss-poor healing factor, the game provides health pickups, but it's inconsistent with their distribution. You see them in the first few levels, but they were basically non-existent for the middle portion of the game, and I only ever saw them again when Logan returned to the facility. I guess the devs thought it would make sense from a narrative perspective to keep the health pickups in the labs, but I don't think anyone would have minded a bit of ludonarrative dissonance versus spending the majority of playtime waiting for health to recover instead of, playing the game. Along with the scuffed healing factor and bad enemy encounters, Logan's rage mode is terrible. When rage activates, Logan can't interact with anything in the level because he's just so mad that he can't push a button or pull a lever. It's like the perfect example of impotent rage. This wouldn't be too much of a problem if it weren't for the fact that rage can automatically activate if the meter fills up. This means I have to break off of combat, either to refill my health or to burn some meter, so that I didn't waste it on a single target or even on no targets. Despite how powerful Logan can get in rage mode, he can still get stunlocked by enemy attacks, so as a super form, it's pretty useless for the majority of the game. It becomes necessary in the later segments because enemies get so tanky. There's a moment in the second level where an enemy falls off a bridge and can die if you don't act fast enough. I kept trying to rescue him, but I'd either fall off the bridge because a dead zone between walking and running is basically non-existent, and because I didn't know that the game wanted me to crouch by the edge in order to trigger the context-sensitive prompt. Yeah, we're in the signposting section right now, and it's bad. The strike prompt that appears when you're in combat depends on your position in relation to the number of enemies in your immediate area. The input delay endemic to the controls always makes it feel finicky to activate a strike. Every boss fight has a gimmick and they're all bad. Sabretooth requires you to get behind him, activate a strike, and then steer him towards a level hazard to deal damage. But you gotta do it fast enough or he'll throw you instead. Wendigo was the worst boss fight in this game, and there's a lot of those here. The first phase requires you to soften up one of the endlessly spawning enemies so that you can pick them up and throw them at Wendigo to sate his appetite. Do this enough times and you get to the second phase. This fight broke me. I had friends watch me stream the game and lose my mind over the course of this fight. You have to get Wendigo to run through these icicles until it gets dizzy. Get behind it, activate a strike, and then...
So long, Bowser!
Sounds simple, right? Well... When Wendigo hits Logan, he goes into combat mode. Logan no longer runs and automatically tracks Wendigo's movements. This is bad, because now Wendigo can easily charge into Logan and knock him off stage into... Huh. Look at that. And look at it again. And again. And again. And again. And again. Somehow I fluked into discovering that if you activate Logan's senses, it disengages combat mode, and he can become maneuverable again. If I had to choose between the unique but gimmicky bosses in X2 versus the repetitive but consistent big guys in XMO, I'll gladly take XMO's encounters. After this fiasco, Logan finally reaches the outskirts of the Department H labs that conducted the Weapon X program.
The nuclear weapons disposal facility on Shadow Moses Island in Alaska's Fox Archipelago was attacked and captured by next-generation special forces. As usual, this is a one-man infiltration mission.
Weapons and equipment OSP?
Yes, this is a top-secret black op. Don't expect any official support.
Did you know that David Hayter wrote the script for X2? Did you know? I thought that was interesting. Each act in the game is broken up into several sections that give you the option to save, exit, or continue. Up until the game reached Shadow Moses, this was a fine way to break up my recordings, but this area was too much with the amount of nonsense it had in it that I finally broke down and used save states on Dolphin. Yeah, I'm playing this on Dolphin despite this also having a PC port, because recording the PC version shrinks the screen size and there was no way I could get it to display in 1080. The only real downside to the Dolphin version is that the emulator can't display transparencies very well, so every loading screen displays the layer where the loading meter is on, which is a really harsh pink background. I've developed a Pavlovian response to that color, because of all the resets I've had to do. On the way to Shadow Moses, the game forces you into doing stealth sections with insta-fail states if you deviate from the intended method. These sections kill whatever sense of ingenuity you could do in a stealth section, and waste even more of your time. I want to give the game credit for changing up the layout of the labs from the escape level and the return level, but this game has worn down all of my goodwill with its bad mechanics and horrible combat. Fighting Sabretooth for the second time was okay up until the final phases. He starts throwing objects at Logan and you have to hit them back with your claws to damage Creed. Then he starts pouncing around and causes shockwaves which can damage Logan. The trick is to go to where the crosshair shows where Creed will land and perform a strike. That's so counterintuitive because instincts would tell you to move away from the center of the attack. I had to look up a guide to figure that out. For some reason, the devs wanted to let you pilot a mech in this game, which should be a great power trip, but it is one of the worst set pieces in the entire game. The mech's controls are bad, with an auto-centering cursor that might have been helpful for GameCube controllers, but there should have been an option to disable that feature. The mech is incredibly squishy, and it's easy to lose it to enemy mechs as well as infantry fire, which is impossible to face as Logan alone, and the game doesn't let you either repair the mech or offer a replacement. Thank goodness for save states. They do this set piece twice, and it's bad in both instances. Later on, the game gets obsessed with indestructible turrets that you have to run past. This one room spawns a squad full of soldiers, and turrets spring onto the walls. Another guide helped me with developing a method for this room. Punch out the turrets, knock out all of the guns from the enemies, and fight them off. I've titled the clip to this set piece as the worst stage in the entire game. The only thing that I enjoyed in this stage was the intro to the boss fight.
Juggernaut. Cyborg or not, that was just plain rude.
Who died and made you miss manners? Better get scared, short stuff! You know you're no match for me!
I was dying when Juggernaut popped up because his voice is constantly clipping the mic. He's just a walking shitpost. Big surprise, but his boss fight sucks. Get him to run into these electric posts, hit him twice, do a strike, rinse and repeat. Avoid the gas because it stuns you and leaves you open to attack. The game then makes you use a turret to destroy the ray dome on the base. Turret sections are horrible in X2 because the enemies can tear you apart if you're not paying attention. The game alerts you to a helicopter that's approaching, and this is the game's dirtiest trick. Although the chopper fires slow-moving missiles, the real threat is on the opposite side, where a gunman will shoot you from your blind spot if you focus on the chopper. The penultimate level pits you against Magneto, who was broken out of the mutant prison from the previous level. Don't worry if you've lost a thread on where we are and how we got here.
It don't matter. None of this matters.
The enemies in this level have range attacks that can disable your already scuffed healing factor, and have set pieces revolve around destroying electrical sources so that Magneto can't remove the device that's inhibiting his powers. Magneto is the second worst boss of this game, rivaling Wendigo. He flies all over the place, chucks objects at you, can lift you up and you have to shake out of it, shoots an energy attack at you that just guarantees free damage and boosts your rage, so that you're almost always triggered. And then if you wait too long when he's at the top center of the arena, he'll break out of his inhibitor and cause you to have an aneurysm, which is an instant kill. The only way to hurt Magneto is to perform a jumping slash attack, which I never knew I could do up until that fight. You have to press jump and primary attack simultaneously to perform the move. After this, you can finally confront the final boss, Lady Deathstrike. Unlike the film's version, which was apparently mind-controlled and had no personality, this version of Yoriko planned out Logan's demise because, revenge. This fight is surprisingly merciful compared to the entire bullshit that is this game. If you don't know who Lady Deathstrike is, she underwent the same adamantium treatment that Logan did, and thus has the same level of lethality. So how is that conveyed in the game? It isn't. She barely does any damage with her press-ons, which is appropriate because that's how Logan's felt the entire time against regular enemies in this game. There's a gimmick phase near the end where you have to hit these Tesla coils to cause shock damage, and then position her at the edge of the helipad to perform the final strike. But this fight is like 5th worst in the game.
My death is not the death you will know, Logan. I have forsaken my humanity for revenge, and I will see no end of pain. Only an eternity of cold replacement parts and the smell of hot solder. You have won, Logan. For now!
Rogue will be with you soon, Logan. Hang in there.
Xavier's such a dick in this game. He's been watching Logan the entire time in his head, so he knows what's going on, and he tells him to hang on while Yoriko falls to her death. The story ends with Rogue giving Logan the cure to Fox Die after Beast was able to synthesize it based on the stuff Logan was able to relay to Xavier. And that's X2.
Nasty. You didn't bring me anything frosty to wash it down with, did you, darling?
I'm the pilot, not the cabin attendant, big boy. You ready to go home?
The game teases a sequel with Mr. Sinister, Apocalypse, and Omega Red, but I think the X3 game is more of a standard adaptation to the film. I hate this game. I've never been that mean to the stuff I've covered before, including Infernal, but for real, fuck this game. What sucks the most about X2 is that, despite the gameplay, I actually like the plot. I like that it takes advantage of the X-Men setting in a way that the films never could. I like the chunky 6th gen art style that the models have, and the environment art is pretty good for its time. I like the cameo appearances that pop up here and there for fan service's sake. This game has Colossus in it, and you can do a fastball special with him during Juggernaut's fight. That's cool. Jennifer Hale voices Rogue for the split second she appears, and I like this version of Rogue. I want to see more of this version of X-Men, but without the garbage gameplay. The bonus features are also more substantial in X2 than XMO, with comic books that you can collect in the campaign to unlock various outfits. They got a great pick of outfits for this game. They're not just recolors of Logan's X-suit like in XMO. Hell, the default model uses Logan's new X-Men outfit, which was the inspiration for the jumpsuits in the films, and the X2 suit isn't unlockable in the game, but you can tell that the new X-Men suit is way better than the movie suit. I don't know why they never did a straight adaptation of the new X-Men suits, when they would have looked great back in 2003. The Xavier profiles provide info on characters that conflict with events in later films, like when he reveals that Juggernaut is his stepbrother, but in X3 they're both in the same scene and don't acknowledge one another. This game went the extra mile and provided blooper cutscenes. One of them features Mark Hamill recording a cliched line, and they animated Wolverine to match his attitude in that session.
Here comes a real classic. This one I like. It's quiet. Too quiet. I love the classics. It's quiet. Too quiet. That's why it's a classic. It's great.
All right, good. Hold on, please.
Oh, it's fun to pretend, isn't it?
But that's not enough to make up for having to play X2 Wolverine's Revenge. Not even the Resident Evil Village reference that the game made 18 years in advance can make up for playing this game. This is why I wanted to cover both games together. They both have strong and weak elements. If there was a Wolverine game that featured Larry Hama's version of the X-Men, but it controlled like Raven Software's version of Logan, that would have been instant kino. XMO definitely makes you feel like you're playing Wolverine, but X2 feels like it's trying to stamp down on that feeling whenever possible. Marvel owns the film rights to the X-Men now, and it's unclear when they'll show up in the MCU, but I really hope that they put that license out to another developer who can do Wolverine justice. These two titles show that there's fertile ground here, and I want a game with a really good Wolverine outfit that isn't just from the Deadpool game. X-Men Origins Wolverine is practically abandonware nowadays. You can find a copy of it somewhere online. X2 is definitely available on my abandonware and runs fine, but it's not the best version if you intend to capture any footage. Please play X-Men Origins Wolverine, but you can watch a long play of X2.